answer to your question, I already have a diamond ring.
Then why don't you wear it?
I am wearing it.
From tragic accidents that ended actors' careers to secret gay romances hidden in plain sight, the beloved supernatural sitcom Bewitched cast spells far stranger than anything Samantha twitched her nose for. Behind those iconic animated opening credits and wholesome family plots lurked scandalous deaths, bizarre casting choices, and production secrets that would make even Endora gasp. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Bewitched. Fact 1. The show almost had a different star and name.
Aunt Clara, I think I heard the baby cry.
You did? No, I didn't hear the baby cry.
Aunt Clara.
Before Elizabeth Montgomery ever twitched her nose as Samantha Stevens, Bewitched was supposed to star a completely different actress playing a character with an entirely different name. The show's creator, Saul Sachs, had his heart set on casting Tony Award-winning actress Tammy Grimes in the lead role, and at that time, the witch character wasn't called Samantha at all. Her name was Cassandra. Tammy Grimes was a natural choice for the part, having already won critical acclaim for her performance in The Unsinkable Molly Brown on Broadway. Sachs was particularly drawn to what he described as Grimes' elf-like appearance, which he felt would be perfect for portraying a magical character. The network executives at Screen Gems were also enthusiastic about casting Grimes, and initial discussions moved forward with her as the intended star. However, Grimes had some serious concerns about the character and the show's premise that ultimately led her to turn down what would become one of television's most iconic roles. She questioned why a character with such incredible magical powers would limit herself to mundane household tasks and suburban problems. As author Herbie J. Pilato explained, Grimes felt that if the character had all this power, why doesn't she cure all the diseases in the world or solve major global issues like wars and poverty? This philosophical disagreement with the show's concept made her uncomfortable with accepting the role. When Elizabeth Montgomery was eventually cast to replace Grimes, she brought her own strong opinions about the character. Montgomery refused to keep the original name Cassandra because she felt it was too deeply connected to the cursed prophetess from Greek mythology who was blessed with the gift of prophecy, but cursed so that no one would believe her predictions. Montgomery wanted the character to have a more positive association, so the name was changed to the more cheerful and alliterative Samantha Stevens, creating the character that millions of viewers would come to love. Fact 2. Rehearsals started on JFK's assassination day. The cast and crew of Bewitched were scheduled to begin their very first rehearsals for the pilot episode on November 22, 1963. But that day would become one of the most tragic dates in American history when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. What should have been an exciting milestone for the new television series instead became a day of national mourning and personal grief for several key people involved in the production. The timing of this tragic event was particularly devastating for Elizabeth Montgomery and the show's producer and director, William Asher, who weren't just casual admirers of the president, but had actual personal connections to him. William Asher had produced one of the most famous political events in entertainment history when he organized President Kennedy's star-studded birthday celebration at Madison Square Garden in May of 1962. This was the legendary party where Marilyn Monroe made her iconic appearance, wearing that stunning skin-tight dress and breathlessly singing "Happy Birthday, Mr. President," in front of 15,000 guests and a television audience of millions. Because of Asher's involvement in that historic celebration, both he and Montgomery had developed a friendship with Kennedy and felt a deep personal loss when the news broke that tragic Friday afternoon. Author Herbie J. Pilato, who wrote extensively about the show's history, explained that Montgomery and Asher were friends with JFK, which made the assassination particularly hard for everyone involved in the production to process. The entire cast and crew were understandably distraught and struggled to focus on their work while the nation grieved. Despite the emotional turmoil of that day, the show eventually moved forward with production, though it took time for everyone to recover from the shock. The pilot episode that they were supposed to start rehearsing that day would eventually air on September 17, 1964, launching what would become one of television's most beloved supernatural sitcoms. Fact 3. Elizabeth Montgomery was secretly pregnant 3 times.
But anyway, last I heard they were involved in the most delicious scandal. Maybe I will.
Elizabeth Montgomery managed to keep one of Hollywood's best-kept secrets during the early years of Bewitched, when she was pregnant with her first child during the show's inaugural season, and viewers had absolutely no idea. Montgomery was married to the show's director and producer, William Asher, and the couple had 3 children together during the 8-year run of the series. But the production handled each pregnancy in completely different ways. When Montgomery became pregnant with her first child, William, in 1964, the show was still finding its footing, and the producers decided not to incorporate the pregnancy into the storyline. Instead, the wardrobe department worked overtime to hide Montgomery's growing belly from television audiences, using carefully selected loose-fitting clothing, baggy dresses, and strategic camera angles that kept viewers focused on her face and upper body. The costume team became experts at choosing outfits that would conceal her changing figure, and the cinematographers made sure to frame shots in ways that wouldn't reveal her condition. However, when Montgomery became pregnant for the second time, the show's writers decided to embrace the situation and wrote her pregnancy directly into the script, which led to the birth of Samantha and Darren's magical daughter Tabitha in the second season. This approach worked so well that when Montgomery was expecting her third child, Rebecca, the writers once again incorporated the pregnancy into the show's storyline, giving birth to the character of Adam, Samantha's son, during the 6th season in 1969. The remarkable thing about Montgomery's pregnancies is that she never took any significant time off from filming, continuing to work throughout each pregnancy and maintaining her demanding schedule as the star of a weekly television series. Her ability to balance motherhood with her professional responsibilities while keeping her first pregnancy completely secret from millions of viewers demonstrates both her dedication to the show and the impressive skills of the production team who helped maintain the illusion. Fact 4. The famous nose, Twitch was enhanced movie magic.
Samantha, what's wrong?
Who's she?
It's your Aunt Hagatha.
Oh, so it is. What's she doing here?
The iconic nose, Twitch, that became Samantha Stevens' signature magical gesture wasn't quite as natural as it appeared on television, and the story behind how it came to be is actually more fascinating than the effect itself. Elizabeth Montgomery did have a real habit of twitching her upper lip and nose area when she was nervous or frustrated, but what viewers saw on screen was the result of both her natural ability and some clever film enhancement techniques that made the twitch appear more dramatic and magical. The discovery of Montgomery's natural twitch happened quite by accident when her husband and the show's director, William Asher, noticed her doing it at home during everyday situations. In a 2000 interview with the Archive of American Television, Asher explained that Montgomery wasn't even aware she made this little movement until he pointed it out to her. He recalled watching her one evening when she was at the bar making a drink and spilled something or made some kind of mistake, and she did the twitch in response to her frustration. Asher immediately recognized the potential and said, "That's it," knowing he had found the perfect physical gesture to represent Samantha's magic. However, Montgomery couldn't always produce the twitch on command or make it dramatic enough for the cameras, so the show's technical team had to get creative. While Montgomery wiggled her nose as best she could during filming, the production crew enhanced the effect through various film techniques and editing tricks to make it appear more pronounced and magical on screen. The enhanced version that audiences fell in love with was actually a combination of Montgomery's natural ability and movie magic working together. What made this gesture so brilliant for the show was that it gave Samantha's magic a distinctive visual signature that was both subtle and memorable. Unlike other magical shows that relied on elaborate special effects, Bewitched found its magic in this simple, enhanced human gesture that became one of television's most recognizable movements. Fact 5. Dick York left due to tragic accident aftermath.
Got your laugh. Now run along and let me go back to work.
Larry, we're not kidding. My wife is a witch.
Aaron, if you want a vacation, ask for it. You don't have to go through this fruitcake routine.
Dick York's sudden departure from Bewitched after 5 seasons wasn't caused by creative differences, salary disputes, or personality conflicts, as many fans assumed at the time, but rather stemmed from a tragic accident that occurred years before the show even began. In 1959, while filming the movie They Came to Cordura with Gary Cooper and Rita Hayworth, York was involved in a scene that required him to lift what he thought would be a light prop or piece of equipment off a flatbed truck, but the situation went horribly wrong in an instant. York explained the accident in a 1992 interview, describing how he was expecting to lift something manageable, but instead found himself suddenly and jarringly lifting the entire weight of a 180-pound extra who had been lying on the flatbed. The unexpected full weight of another person caused the muscles along the right side of York's back to tear completely, and as he put it, they just snapped and let loose. This single moment of miscommunication and bad timing would haunt York for the rest of his career, and ultimately end his time on Bewitched. For years after the accident, York managed to work through increasingly severe chronic pain with the help of doctor-prescribed medications, including codeine, muscle relaxants, and sleeping pills. He had a board installed in his trailer on the Bewitched set where he could lie flat to relieve the pain, and the crew members would help him with physical tasks like opening heavy doors. However, by 1968, York had become addicted to his pain medications, and his condition continued to deteriorate despite his efforts to continue working. The end came during the filming of an episode called Daddy Does His Thing, when York collapsed on set and had to be rushed to the hospital. After discussing his situation with director William Asher from his hospital bed, York made the difficult decision to leave the show permanently, never returning to the role that had made him famous. Fact 6. Agnes Moorehead initially turned down.
That your far-out baby blue eyes kind of turned me on.
Serena, you certainly know how to flatter the senior citizens.
Oh, Daddy Bear.
Endora role, Agnes Moorehead, who would become one of television's most memorable witches as Endora, actually said no to the role when it was first offered to her, and it took a completely random encounter in a department store to change her mind. Moorehead was already an established and respected actress with decades of experience in radio, film, and theater, including her famous work with Orson Welles in Citizen Kane and other Mercury Theater productions, so taking on a television sitcom role wasn't necessarily appealing to her at first. The turning point came during what seemed like an ordinary shopping trip when Moorehead happened to run into Elizabeth Montgomery at Bloomingdale's department store in New York. During their chance conversation, Montgomery personally asked Moorehead if she would consider joining the cast of Bewitched, and there was something about Montgomery's direct personal appeal that made Moorehead reconsider her initial rejection of the role. This face-to-face request from the show's star convinced Moorehead to give the project another look and ultimately accept the part of Samantha's formidable mother. However, Moorehead's decision to join the cast came with very low expectations about the show's potential success, as she fully expected Bewitched to be canceled after just one season, like many other new television series. She negotiated a contract that only required her to appear in 8 out of every 12 episodes, which would give her time to pursue other projects that she considered more artistically fulfilling. When the show became a massive hit and ran for 8 seasons, Moorhead found herself feeling somewhat trapped by its success. Despite the show's popularity and her 6 Emmy nominations for the role, Moorhead was quite vocal about her dissatisfaction with much of the writing, dismissing many of the Bewitched scripts as hack work in interviews. She made it clear that while she appreciated the show's success, she didn't want to be remembered solely as a television witch, given her distinguished career in more serious dramatic roles. Fact 7. Hanna-Barbera created the iconic opening credits. The memorable animated opening sequence that introduced each episode of Bewitched wasn't created by the same production company that made the live-action show, but instead came from the legendary animation studio Hanna-Barbera Productions, the powerhouse behind some of television's most beloved cartoon series. This was the same studio that had already given audiences the Flintstones, the Jetsons, and would later create Scooby-Doo, so they brought decades of animation expertise to the task of creating the perfect introduction for Samantha Stevens and her magical world. The talented artist Ed Benedict, who had worked on many of Hanna-Barbera's most successful projects, was specifically assigned to work on the Bewitched opening animation, and he created a sequence that perfectly captured the show's central premise in just a few short animated moments. The opening featured Samantha riding through the air on her broomstick while wearing traditional witch clothing, complete with a pointed hat and flowing robes, establishing her magical nature right from the start. The most brilliant part of Benedict's animation was the transformation sequence where Samantha twitches her animated nose and instantly changes from her witch appearance into the perfectly groomed suburban housewife that viewers would see throughout each episode. This visual transformation told the entire story of the show in seconds, showing audiences that Samantha was both a powerful witch and a devoted wife, trying to fit into the normal world of 1960s suburbia. What makes this collaboration even more interesting is that Hanna-Barbera later reused the animated versions of Samantha and Darren in a crossover episode of The Flintstones called Samantha, where Elizabeth Montgomery and Dick York actually provided the voices for their animated counterparts. The opening credits were so well designed and memorable that they became just as iconic as the show itself, perfectly setting the tone for the magical comedy that would follow in each episode. Fact 8. Supporting cast had to provide their own wardrobe. Bewitched may have looked like a big-budget production with its elaborate magical effects and stylish costumes, but behind the scenes, the show was operating under much tighter financial constraints than viewers might have imagined, especially when it came to wardrobe expenses for the supporting cast members. Unlike the lead actors who had their costumes provided by the studio's wardrobe department, many of the supporting players were required to bring their own clothing to the set each week and submit their selections to the wardrobe crew for approval before filming could begin. This unusual arrangement meant that actors like Casey Rogers, who played Louise Tate, would arrive at the studio with their personal wardrobes in hand, hoping their clothing choices would fit the tone and style that the directors wanted for each particular episode. The actors essentially became responsible for maintaining and expanding their own character's wardrobe, which was quite different from the typical Hollywood production process, where studios provided all costumes and accessories for their performers. However, this budget-conscious approach to wardrobe led to one of the show's most memorable fashion elements when Agnes Moorehead decided to incorporate her own spectacular jewelry into Endora's distinctive look. Moorehead regularly wore a stunning starburst-shaped brooch as part of Endora's costume, and this wasn't a piece of costume jewelry provided by the studio's prop department, but rather Moorehead's own personal accessory that featured an impressive 8.5 carats of genuine diamonds. The brooch became such a signature part of Endora's appearance that viewers came to expect it in nearly every episode where she appeared, and Elizabeth Montgomery was reportedly fascinated by the beautiful piece, frequently complimenting Moorehead on the spectacular diamond pin. What audiences assumed was simply another costume element created specifically for the character was actually a valuable piece of personal jewelry that Moorhead generously shared with the production to enhance her character's sophisticated and otherworldly appearance. Fact 9. Paul Lynde's Uncle Arthur was secretly gay. Coded Paul Lynde brought something completely revolutionary to 1960s television when he portrayed Uncle Arthur on Bewitched, using his naturally campy and distinctively snarky persona to create what many consider one of the first non-stereotypical queer characters on mainstream American television. Linda was gay in real life during an era when being openly homosexual could destroy an entertainer's career, so he found clever ways to incorporate his authentic self into his performances without explicitly coming out to the public. Uncle Arthur was written as Endora's mischievous brother who loved playing pranks on Darren and causing general magical mayhem. But Linda infused the character with a flamboyant energy and sharp wit that resonated strongly with audiences who recognized something special about his performance, even if they couldn't quite put their finger on what made him so memorable. Unlike other television portrayals of gay-coded characters from that time period, Uncle Arthur wasn't a victim or an object of ridicule, but rather a confident, fearless character who dished out sarcastic comebacks and held his own against every other character on the show. The most surprising aspect of Linde's impact on Bewitched is that he actually appeared in only 11 episodes out of the show's total 254 episodes. Yet his character became so beloved and memorable that fans frequently approached him on the street, calling him Uncle Arthur for the rest of his life. Lynde himself was amazed by this phenomenon, often telling friends that people must have seen a lot of reruns because everybody recognized him from the show, despite his relatively small number of appearances. His success on Bewitched helped launch Lynde's career as a regular on The Hollywood Squares, where he continued to use his quick wit and campy humor to entertain audiences, often making thinly veiled references to his sexuality through double entendres and clever wordplay that gay viewers could appreciate while remaining acceptable to mainstream television standards. Fact 10. The show featured real alcohol during drinking scenes.
Then I have to stop off and pick up a special surprise I found for you.
What's the occasion?
It's an everyday occasion. I love you.
Stop! I'm getting nauseous. Up here, my darling.
Television production in the 1960s operated under very different standards than what audiences might expect today. And one of the most surprising practices on the Bewitched set was that whenever the script called for characters to have cocktails or other alcoholic beverages, the actors were actually drinking real alcohol instead of the fake substitutes that modern productions typically use. This wasn't unusual for the time period, as many television shows and movies in the 60s routinely used genuine liquor during filming rather than creating elaborate props or non-alcoholic alternatives. The practice created some interesting challenges for the directors and production crew, who had to carefully manage their shooting schedules to ensure they could capture all the necessary scenes before the alcohol began to affect the actors' performances or their ability to remember their lines accurately. This meant that any scenes involving drinking had to be filmed relatively quickly and efficiently, with directors making sure to get multiple takes early in the process while the actors were still completely sober and at their professional best. The most commonly consumed alcoholic beverage on the Bewitched set was schnapps, which appeared in numerous episodes when characters like Darren, Larry Tate, or other adults were shown having drinks during business meetings, social gatherings, or simply relaxing at home after a long day of dealing with magical mishaps and supernatural family drama. The actors had to pace themselves carefully and limit their actual consumption to avoid any problems, but they were indeed sipping real schnapps whenever their characters were supposed to be drinking. This behind-the-scenes reality adds an amusing layer to watching those classic episodes today. Knowing that the actors were not only dealing with the usual challenges of memorizing scripts, hitting their marks, and delivering convincing performances, but also had to maintain their professionalism while consuming actual alcohol during what was supposed to be their regular workday at the television studio. Fact 11. Alice Pierce. 1 Emmy after death.
Read the sign, the door is out of order.
Not for Samantha Stevens, it isn't. How is that, Abner? Tell me, please explain it to me.
I'll explain it to you. You're out of order.
Alice Pierce's dedication to her craft and her role as the perpetually suspicious neighbor, Gladys Kravitz, on Bewitched, was so strong that she continued working on the show even while privately battling a serious illness that would ultimately claim her life. Pierce had been diagnosed with cancer, but she kept her condition largely private and refused to let it interfere with her professional commitments, continuing to film episodes and deliver the comedic performances that made Gladys Kravitz one of television's most memorable, nosy neighbors. Gladys Kravitz was the perfect foil for Samantha's attempts to keep her magical abilities secret, as she was always peering through her curtains, witnessing strange occurrences at the Stevens house, and trying desperately to convince her husband Abner and other neighbors that something supernatural was happening next door. Pierce brought a frantic energy and perfect comic timing to the role, making Gladys both annoying and endearing as she stumbled upon magical mishaps that no one else would ever believe she had actually seen. The most remarkable aspect of Pierce's commitment to the show is that she was literally filming episodes on the day she passed away, working right up until her final moments, and never allowing her illness to compromise her professionalism or her dedication to bringing Gladys Kravitz to life. Her first appearance as Gladys was in an episode called Be It Ever So Mortgaged, and she continued playing the character through her final episode, maintaining the same enthusiasm and energy that had made her such an integral part of the show's success. 2 months after Alice Pierce's death, she received the ultimate recognition for her work when she posthumously won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actress for her portrayal of Gladys Kravitz. This bittersweet honor acknowledged both her talent and her unwavering commitment to her craft, even in the face of her personal health struggles, making her Emmy win both a celebration of her achievement and a poignant reminder of her dedication. Fact 12. Special effects were entirely manual labor. Creating the magical effects that made Bewitched so enchanting for viewers required an enormous amount of behind-the-scenes physical work from dedicated crew members, as there were no computer-generated effects or digital assistants available in the 1960s to help bring Samantha's magic to life. Every single supernatural moment that audiences saw on screen was the result of carefully coordinated manual labor by hard-working stagehands who had to rush around the set, moving props, rearranging furniture, and creating the illusion of magic through pure physical effort and precise timing. One of the most challenging effects to create was Samantha's famous kitchen cleaning scenes, where she would raise her arms and magically tidy up the entire room in seconds while preparing for unexpected visitors or dealing with the aftermath of a magical mishap. To film these sequences, Elizabeth Montgomery had to stand perfectly still with her arms raised high in the air while the director called "cut," and then crew members would sprint onto the set to quickly remove all the clutter, dirty dishes, newspapers, and other mess from the kitchen before the cameras started rolling again. The process was much more physically demanding for Montgomery than viewers might imagine, because she had to hold her arms in that raised position for extended periods while the crew worked, and the strain on her muscles became so intense that her arms would actually ache from the prolonged holding. The production team eventually provided Montgomery with special crutches that she could use to support her arms during these lengthy setup periods, giving her some relief while maintaining the exact positioning needed to create the seamless magical effect when filming resumed. Other common magical effects included objects floating through the air using nearly invisible wires, characters disappearing and reappearing through careful camera work and quick costume changes, and furniture moving by itself with the help of crew members crawling around on the floor pushing items while staying out of the camera's view. Fact 13. Dick Sargent was originally offered the role.
Sam, you have finally achieved the ultimate in housewifery.
I've fixed scrambled eggs before.
No. I mean volunteering for Mrs. Prescott's charity bazaar and fashion show.
First, The casting history of Darren Stevens on Bewitched contains one of television's most interesting what-if scenarios, because Dick Sargent, who eventually became the second actor to play Samantha's mortal husband, was actually the producer's first choice for the role back when the show was originally being cast in 1964. Sargent had been offered the part of Darren during the initial casting process, but he made the decision to turn down what would become one of television's most recognizable roles in favor of accepting a starring role in a different sitcom called Broadside. Broadside was a military comedy that featured Sargent as a naval officer, and at the time, it probably seemed like a reasonable career choice since the show was being produced by a major studio and had the backing of network executives who believed it would be successful. However, Broadside turned out to be short-lived and was canceled after just one season, while Bewitched went on to become a massive hit that ran for 8 years and made household names of its cast members. When Dick York's health problems forced him to leave Bewitched in 1969, the producers immediately thought of Sargent as his replacement, since they had wanted to cast him in the role originally and knew he would be a good fit for the character. However, Sargent was concerned about the awkward situation of replacing a fellow actor, especially since he and York were friends in the entertainment industry and had mutual respect for each other's work. Before accepting the role, Sargent took the thoughtful step of personally calling Dick York to ask for his blessing and to make sure there were no hard feelings about the replacement. York graciously gave Sargent his approval and encouragement, telling him that he understood the business realities of television production and wanted Sargent to take the part. This gesture of professional courtesy and personal friendship helped smooth the transition between the two actors. Fact 14. The show had serious continuity errors in spin-offs.
Wanted your buckle and button.
Buckle and button.
But this is even better.
This is delayed battle fatigue from Valley Forge.
When ABC decided to capitalize on the success of Bewitched by creating a spin-off series called Tabitha in 1977, the writers and producers made some baffling decisions that completely contradicted the established facts from the original show, creating continuity errors so obvious that even casual fans immediately noticed the problems. The spin-off was supposed to follow the adventures of Samantha and Darren's daughter Tabitha as a young adult working at a television station. But the show's creators seemed to ignore or forget many of the basic details that had been clearly established during the 8-year run of Bewitched. The most glaring continuity error involved the birth order and characteristics of Samantha's 2 children, which the spin-off completely reversed from what viewers had seen in the original series. In Bewitched, Tabitha was clearly established as the older child who had inherited her mother's magical powers, while her younger brother Adam was initially thought to be a normal mortal child without any supernatural abilities, though later episodes revealed that he was actually a warlock as well. However, in the Tabitha spin-off, Adam suddenly became Tabitha's older brother instead of her younger sibling, and the show portrayed him as a completely mortal character who disapproved of his sister's magical abilities, essentially making him the Darren-like figure who constantly urged Tabitha not to use her powers. This complete reversal of their established relationship and birth order made no sense to anyone who had watched the original series and remembered the children's actual ages and personalities. Even more problematic was the fact that both characters had aged far more than the 5 years that had passed between the end of Bewitched in 1972 and the start of Tabitha in 1977 would have allowed. The spin-off portrayed Tabitha as a woman in her 20s working in television when she should have been only about 12 or 13 years old based on her age in the final episodes of the original series. Fact 15. Only 3 original cast members survived to 50th anniversary.
I haven't skated since then, so I'm probably a little rusty, but if you would like me to, I will personally teach Tabitha.
I wouldn't like you to.
When Bewitched reached its 50th anniversary in 2014, the passage of time had taken a heartbreaking toll on the show's beloved cast, leaving only 3 actors still alive from the 23 performers who had appeared in 10 or more episodes during the series' 8-year run. This sobering reality highlighted just how much time had passed since the show first enchanted audiences and how many talented performers from television's golden age had been lost over the decades. The 3 surviving cast members represented different generations of the show's history and demonstrated the longevity that some of the actors enjoyed both during and after their time on Bewitched. Bernard Fox, who played the bumbling witch doctor Dr. Bombay with his distinctive British accent and theatrical entrances, was 87 years old at the time of the anniversary and held the record for being the oldest surviving cast member. Fox had enjoyed the greatest longevity of any of the actors from the series, continuing to work in television and film for many years after Bewitched ended. The other 2 survivors were Diane and Erin Murphy, the twin sisters who had shared the role of Tabitha Stevens throughout most of the show's run, and they were both 50 years old during the anniversary year. What makes their survival particularly meaningful is the eerie coincidence that the Murphy twins were born in 1964, which was the exact same year that Bewitched premiered on television, creating a perfect parallel between their lives and the show's existence. This timing meant that the twins literally grew up alongside the series, spending their entire childhood as part of the Bewitched family and experiencing their formative years in front of television cameras while millions of viewers watched them develop from toddlers into young children. Unfortunately, Bernard Fox passed away in December of 2016 at the age of 89, leaving only the Murphy sisters as the remaining links to the original cast.